Amen. 1 Kings chapter 10, let's read a little bit here, get some context. It says, when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels. That's a company of people, by the way. She came with camels, and she bore spices, and really relative to the region she's from. That's why this is important. She bore spices, very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. And so in verse 3, Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing so difficult for the king that he could not explain it to her. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, and the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers, and his entryway by which he entered up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit within her. And then she said to the king, it was a true report that I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes. And indeed, the half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame of which I have heard. And in verse 8, happy are your men, and happy are these your servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Verse 9, blessed be the Lord your God who delights in you, setting you on the throne of Israel, because the Lord has loved Israel forever. Therefore, he made you to do justice and righteousness. Now, the Queen of Sheba is actually quite a famous character in the Bible, even though we do not know her name, just that she's the Queen of Sheba. Now, it's believed to be, most believe that Sheba is a part of southern Saudi Arabia, which is Yemen today. She comes about 1,500 miles. If you needed a distance to understand that a little bit, that's like from Florida to Maine, that she travels in the desert to get to him with this massive caravan. So she comes because Solomon's fame has spread throughout the world. He's so wise and rich and powerful. It's one of those things that if you could in those days, you would want, in fact, we're going to read at the end, anyone that could would want to just be around Solomon for a few minutes just to listen to the guy and learn from him. And so this queen is no different. She's like, I have got to ask this guy some questions. And so no doubt she comes with moral questions, political questions, personal questions, trick questions, anything she can think of. She wants to challenge this guy, not for the sake of challenging, but to see truly what he has to offer. Because you know how it is when you go to get help, especially like psychological help, or you have tough questions. Some people just don't cut it, you know what I mean? They're like, well, here's what I do. And you're like, man, that's kind of lame. Solomon wasn't that guy. Solomon was the guy that you would never have dreamed in 1,000 years of his answer. And all you have to do is go back to where he started. When he prayed for wisdom from the Lord, and the Lord said, not only am I going to give that to you, but I'm going to give you great riches as well. And that's going to be something that plays into the rest of the chapter. But the first thing that happens to him are these two prostitutes come to him. And one of them stole the baby, and one of them, it's her baby, but they both had babies, and one of them died, and the other one stole the living baby, and that whole debacle that happened. And so to discover who the true mother was almost an impossibility until Solomon said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut this baby in half, and you can each have half and leave me alone. Well, the true mother, of course, was like, no way, don't cut this baby in half. The mother that stole the baby said, oh yeah, go ahead, cut it in half. It sounds great to me. And he says, well, there's your true mother right there. That was the kind of wisdom that Solomon had, that he could discern a situation so quickly and figure something out that would be such a mystery to people. But more importantly, about the Queen of Sheba tonight, before we look at her response to all of his wealth, Matthew 12. We're actually going to turn there. If you would, join me for just a moment in Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12. We're going to pick up in verse 38, a famous story in the ministry of the Lord Jesus. It says, some of the scribes and Pharisees answered, saying, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. Now, as if they have not seen a sign at this point, the miracles that are on a daily basis, and they're so arrogant to say, we want to see a sign from you. Show us something special. Now, verse 39, he answered, the Lord Jesus said to them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. And no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up in judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And indeed, a greater than Jonah is here. Verse 42. The queen of the south will rise up in the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and indeed, a greater than Solomon is here. So even the Lord Jesus makes reference of the queen of the south, the queen of Sheba, comes to Solomon. He mentions that this woman went way out of her way because she was truly going to pursue an understanding about something, which isn't that a great lesson for all of us, especially as it relates to like religion? Because for a lot of people, religion's like, I just put it on the shelf. I'm not too worried about that. It's not a big deal to me. Well, you're talking about the things that pertain to afterlife, and it's like the arrogance to say, well, I'm not worried about that. You're not worried about what's going to happen to you after you die? You don't want to give any thought to that whatsoever? And what's amazing is these are the kind of people that they didn't. You would say that in this case, that these people, they didn't give much thought to it at all. Whereas Sheba, the queen of Sheba that is, she goes and she pursues. She wants to understand something a little bit more thoroughly, a little more deeply. And so she makes this journey. So even the Lord condemned them and said, you guys have the reality of the Son of God standing in front of you. And you're asking for a sign? The sign is that he's standing there, isn't it? Because again, Solomon's greatness spoke for itself to the degree that people would travel far and wide. Now imagine someone far greater than Solomon coming to the earth and being in your midst, totally available to you. And they're like, we want more. He's like, you guys in the day of judgment are doomed, is what he says to them. So it's an interesting thing to know that takes place in the Lord's ministry, and he refers back to, as we turn back to 1 Kings chapter 10, this scenario with the Queen of Sheba coming to Solomon to pursue his glory, his wisdom, his greatness, all those kinds of things. Now, what is interesting is when she sees it, in all of its glory, everything that he's got going on, it says in verse 5, there was no more spirit in her. The Hebrew word ruach, spirit, means just that, spirit or breath. And that's because, by the way, God breathed into man the breath of life, and he became a living spirit, a living being. So that's why breath and spirit are synonymous terms. And so it's simply what we would say today is this all took her breath away. When it says there were no more spirit within her, it's like, you ever do that? That's one of my favorite things to do. When someone really drops something heavy, I just, whoa, takes your breath away. That's what it's saying. No more spirit within her. She took her breath away. Something finally just broke, and she said, this is incredible. And just the way that he had ordered everything, and the structure, and the garb, and the pomp, it just was mind-blowing. Now, one applicational note to make in verse 8, she says something I think we all do well to take consideration to this evening. Happy are your men, and happy are your servants who stand continually before you. Happy are the people that work for you. Now, it's easy to understand that Solomon would be happy because he's rich like beyond all the wildest imaginations, right? It goes without saying that this guy's pretty happy. But she says the people that work for you are happy because he treats them well. And this is a major point that I want to bring up to you, whether you've been on the receiving end of it, or you may have been guilty of it, or you've seen it, you can at least attest to it. And that is a reality that there is zero separation from our business life to our personal and spiritual life. Do you understand what I'm saying? I am so tired of hearing business people ripping people off, mistreating people, hurting other Christian people, and saying words like, it's not personal. It's not personal. I mentioned the Beast Games recently, and as these people do these brutal things, and they literally cut people off from the chance of winning millions of dollars, the first thing they'll say in response is, it's not personal. Of course it's personal. You're personally attacking me. But we love to say that. We love to distance ourselves from terrible things. It's not personal. Or, my favorite one, it's just business. Hey, here I am, your pastor, we're hanging out, but if we do a business transaction, I go ahead and just pull the wool over your eyes and totally devastate you financially. It's just business. No. It's not just business. It's just not just another thing that we do that's totally separate from everything that we do. The way that we conduct ourselves in our business is very much an outflow of our spiritual relationship to God, correct? So let's take and remember that. And let's not let people off the hook. It's just business. I'm just going to rip people off. I'm going to damage people, hurt people. It's not just business, man. And Solomon is a great case point in that. Again, as we're studying with our Bible 101 class, we just finished up the 10 Commandments in depth with Dennis Prager. And one of the things about the commandment to not steal, which does anyone remember what commandment that is? Thank you. It's the 8th commandment. Very good. No, it's the 8th, right? No thumbs. I knew you were going to say that. It's awesome. It's the 8th commandment. I love some of our students just say, like I go, no thumbs. No, that's not the commandment. It's do not steal. But the commandment, the 8th commandment, not to steal, notice it does not say what not to steal. Because that commandment means you cannot steal anything that is not yours. Because if there was a list, you better believe we would violate that. Think about coveting. Coveting has a list. Don't covet your neighbor's wife, donkey, whatever. But stealing, there is no definition there because it's ambiguous, because it applies to everything. You can't steal a paperclip, man. That's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. But stealing is so much more than just physical things too, though. It's more than that. It's actually stealing people's reputation by ripping them off of their reputation, by damaging people. Psychologically even. That's stealing from somebody. That's not your property. That doesn't belong to you. So anyways, I say all that because she took note of everything, and she's not like, well, I get it, Solomon. It's just business. Man, I have seen over the years people that are very angry at work. They're at church, they're pleasant, wonderful people, happy, love it. Wow, the guy's incredible. Girl, she's so sweet. Get them at work, though? It's like, are they the devil? What's wrong with this person? And they're like, at work, this is how we get stuff done, man. And they're cranked. They're like revving it, red lining, crazy, right? And the justification is, well, here it is. You ready? That's how you get stuff done. And I get it. Hey, listen, I've been a boss. I get it. If you're nice to everybody, they don't appreciate it. They just take advantage of it usually. Hey, here's an extra $50. Well, I guess you got money to spare. No, I was trying to bless you, but now you're being a jerk. You know what I mean? It's like, it's tough when you want to be a nice person. But that does not justify, I got to be a jerk in order to get something done? That's crazy. It's wild. That's how you get stuff done, man. So listen, it's not just business. It is personal. And it's a good thing for every one of us to remember. Our personal lives are on display. We don't separate those things. There's no compartmentalization in our lives. Look at this. Happy are your men servants. And just so you guys know, I had that written down for 2 weeks. I could not wait to share this with you, by the way. I was like, man, last week when we took that deviation, I was like, oh, I just want to talk about that so bad. All right. And then the last thing is my favorite Little House on the Prairie episode, which I've admitted that we watched as a family. There are so many episodes. It's unbelievable. We really hit it hard for like 2 years, and we're like, whew, we need a break. That's a lot of Little House. A lot of Little House, we call it. So we got like a season and a half left, but we've seen a lot of the episodes anyway. And I remember admitting that not only have I watched it, but there was times where I've almost teared up. Oh, it's so moving. And then Brother Andy DeRochers came up to me after church one time, and he said, you are going to have to kill 100 deer with your bare hands to get your man card back. Do you know that? I said, well, fair enough. But I cried when little Jack ran away. No. Come back, Jack. But anyway, my favorite episode is when Mr. Ingles' son is going to buy a piece of land, and he's going to try to surprise his bride and impress his father-in-law, and he's going to buy a piece of land from a businessman. He bought the piece of land. And he did all the right, proper study and realized that this was going to be a very beneficial piece of land to, have a farm on. That's why he wanted to be a farmer. And so he started getting stuff set up, started building the house. Well, the businessman creatively diverted the water that was naturally flowing there because he owned greater parts of the property. He diverted the water so it became barren, so the kid couldn't produce the money, so that all the money he had invested, he lost. And he made the sale money and all the stuff that he invested on the property from that kid. That's just business though, right? It's no big deal. So he does that. Check this out. He does that. And Mr. Ingalls finds out about it. And I don't know, someone came up to me one time and says, I just grew up thinking Mr. Ingalls was the man. He always had the right answers because it's a television show, right? No man ever does all this. But anyway, he goes up to the guy and tries to have a cordial, listen, dude, you're kind of a weasel. Give the guy a chance. He needs some help. But then he realizes that he's done all this to this kid. He realizes he's diverted the water. So he goes back in the bar. So the first conversation was like, come on, man, give him a break. And he realizes this is a hardened businessman that just says, it's just business, It's his fault for not doing his due diligence and all the rest of it. When he finds out he diverted that water, he goes back into the barn. And the guy's like, I told you to get out of here. And Mr. Ingalls gives him a walloping. I love that episode. He just puts the knuckles right. It's like you just hear that, pow, bam, boom, bang. I said, yes, Mr. Ingalls. Yes. Anyways, that's all I had to tell you about that. I think that's a wonderful story. I think it's great, and I wish more businessmen like that got a few black eyes personally, but that's probably not pastoral, and forget I ever said that. How about that? Shall we? Hey, you ripped my son off with the car. Come here. I'm going to boom, boom, boom. Be awesome. I think less business people will be doing that kind of stuff. And then we just say, hey, it's just business when we're done. Okay, I forget I ever said that. Remember, I did not say that anyway at church. Verse 9. Verse 9 is important. Blessed be the Lord your God who delights in you, setting you on the throne of Israel. Now, this is the way God intended it, by the way. What they are seeing is what God intended. Israel being blessed, people coming to Israel. God in Deuteronomy promised this. He says, if you follow me, I will bless you, and other nations will see and look on and desire what you have. And surely they did that. And this is one of those extreme cases. This woman comes 1,500 miles to the desert to see this kind of stuff. It's incredible. But think about it. Israel, this is wild. Israel would be a testimony one way or the other. They would either be blessed, or as Deuteronomy 28 says, or cursed. You're either going to heap blessing upon yourself or curses. But either way, God would make them a testimony to the world around. In blessing, nations would come and see, and they would marvel. In cursing, they would come and marvel at what kind of God would let this happen to his people. And so God didn't care. He said, hey, either way, I don't care. Your choice. You want to be blessed? You want to be cursed? Your choice. And so because Solomon in his early days decided to follow after God, this is what the nation looked like when it was blessed, to its zenith, to its ultimate. Now verse 10. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold. This is what frustrates me, friends. I'm just going to say this real quick. But it's a real principle. Wealth begets wealth. Poverty begets poverty. You know what I mean by that? It's like, what in the world goes on here? They're going to the richest man in the world, these kings, these potentates, these rulers, these queens, everybody. And every time they come, they give him millions of dollars. Wouldn't you and I like that? Someone just came to your door and was like, here's $5 million. Like, yeah. And then the next day, no, here's 3 more, and here's 100, and here's 20. Whoa. No, not to us. But to someone like Solomon, wealth begets wealth. It's a weird, strange concept. The more you have, the more it quantifies. The less you have, the more it quantifies. It's a strange thing. And Solomon's like, you could justify, if there's ever a guy you don't give a gift, it's King Solomon. You could say, hey, I was going to bring you something, and then I realized, what do you give the man that owns everything? Well, nothing, because he has it all. So that's why I have nothing for you. But instead, they come and they drain their bank accounts to bless the richest man in the world. So in verse 10, she gave to the king 120 talents of gold. That's over $330 million, by the way. Spices in great quantity, only relevant to her area, so very important. Great spices, precious stones, There never again came such abundance of spices as the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Also the ships of Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir, brought great quantities of almug wood, and precious stones from Ophir. And the king made steps of the almug wood for the house of the Lord and for the king's house. Also harps and stringed instruments for singers. There never again came such almug wood, nor has their like been seen to this day. Now King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all that she desired, whatever she asked, beside what Solomon had given her according to the royal generosity. So he turned and went to his own country. She went to her own country, and she and her servants. Again, a wild thing that these people just keep blessing Solomon with more and more and more and more. And they keep giving to Solomon more and more and more. Now, in return, as a favor, Solomon gives her sort of a royal generosity, it says. And something of note in verse 13 is all that she desired. Now, we don't know what that is. I mean, all that she desired could have been as simply as the questions that she had. However, there is an Ethiopian tradition, which you've got Coptic Christians, if you know anything about this, Ethiopian tradition that says that she wanted to have a baby with Solomon, so he impregnated her. In fact, the ultimate legend is even one of her handmaidens in this whole thing, which, unfortunately, knowing Solomon's sexual deviancy, it's not hard to imagine, but there's nothing biblically that we could point to other than this right here that might be a fit. All that she desired, if she so desired that, which, again, no history that can point to that, no proof of it or anything else, but just a tradition at best. Now, picking up verse 14, look at this. The weight of gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666. That's a heck of an amount of gold, isn't it? Okay. And verse 15. Besides that, from the traveling merchants, from the income of traders, from all the kings of Arabia, from the governors of the country. And verse 16, King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 shields of hammered gold. 3 minas of gold went into each shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. And moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps. The top of the throne was round at the back, and the armrest on either side of the palace, or the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the armrest. 12 lions stood each there, one on each side of the 6 steps. Nothing like this had been made for any other kingdom. And all King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Not one was silver, for there was accounted nothing like in the days of Solomon. For the king, in verse 22, had merchants' ships and sea with the fleet of merchants. Ships came bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and monkeys. Now, there's a lot here, actually, we're going to dig into. Start with this. And I kind of made like a really lame joke there in verse 14. He had 666 talents of gold. A heck of an amount of gold. Okay, yeah, I didn't. There was a guy, I did a little race one time. We have racing bibs, and they always have a number attached to them, which I don't know why. There's like they do. And this guy's number was 666. 666, And I said, that is one heck of a number kind of thing. Anyway, that doesn't matter, does it? But what is actually relevant and serious here, 666 talents of gold. The number that registers in our mind, you go to the book of Revelation, you hear of the Antichrist, and his number shall be that of 666, the number of a man, it tells us. Now, anytime there's something in a repetition, especially in 3, it's the ultimate sense. So, verily, verily, the Lord would say. Whenever you would say verily, verily, it's like you really need to listen. It's like maximizing truth. But there's only really in the Bible one time where you see like a triple redundancy, and that's like holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, right? So there's a sense that it just in Jewish understanding, the more you said it, and up to 3 times, it was just, 3 times was unbelievable, you know? So it's like, hey, I was going to work today and I hit a hole, I hit a pothole, and they're like, whoa, man, that's a bummer. But if you were like, I hit a pothole hole, they'd be like, whoa! You could never even say pot, hole, hole, hole. Or they'd be like, how are you even standing here now? Because whenever you could quantify it like that, they would say, this is unbelievable, it's unimaginable. And all that to say, 666, the measure of a man, it's the completion, the fullness is the idea. And what we know of the Antichrist is he is like a perfected man. He is a man who is the perfect sense of a man in power, in authority, in wealth, and status, and stature, all of that. It goes on about his oration abilities, all sorts of things to deal with the Antichrist. What is interesting for us tonight as we read this, there's only one other man in the entire Bible that number is associated with, and it's right here in 1 Kings chapter 10 with Solomon. That number is even associated with him is very interesting because he is in a sense, and again, this is not to say that he is the Antichrist, but in a way, the Antichrist is like Solomon. He is a version of Solomon. Because Solomon, remember, was perfect in authority. He was perfect in wealth. He was perfect in stature. He was a handsome man. He just had every box that a man could possibly need in life, so to speak, or want or desire, whatever you want to call it. And so, in a way, the Antichrist is a model after Solomon, who is a man in a sense, a perfect state. Now, for what it's worth, that quantity of gold is over $1 billion a year that comes to him. Now, what's weird, and what is really weird, is that you would think that all of these exports and all these things coming into them and the great vast amount of wealth that's coming to Solomon, you would think that would ease up the taxes in Israel. But when we find Solomon at his death and his son takes over for him, that's not the case. In fact, taxes are so high that people really struggle with it. And they ask his son, they say, please give us a break on our taxes, it's too much. And the son's famous response is, well, if you thought my dad's taxes were bad, buckle up, buttercup. It's like, oh, here we go. Like, it's terrible. We'll get to see that in a few weeks. But Solomon, you would think, because of all of this great wealth, well, here's the thing. Just like I said, wealth begets wealth. Well, it also has like an unsatiated taste all the time. And because of that, to maintain the lifestyle that went up and up and up and up and up, the taxes in Israel went up as well. And that's sort of an unsaid thing in Solomon's day. People love the vast wealth, the beauty, the grandeur, the fact that people came. But at the end of the day, all that stuff costs more and more and more and more money. And so it's a real sad statement on his life. We'll see more of that in the weeks to come. But in verse 17, it talks about shields. He makes big shields and small shields. Just so you just like to boil it down, the shields put together, their numerical value is like $50 million. He has so much gold that he decorates his house in Lebanon. He's like, I don't know, let's make all these shields out of gold. Because you would never use gold in war. It's too heavy and then it's too soft. So you'd never use gold for battle. But for decoration, it just looks awesome. But actually, what's cool about that image, though, is that is a perfect representation of Solomon. He's sort of got this warrior spirit visual about him and sort of persona about him, but he's like gold. He's heavy, he's got some weight to him, but he's soft. And he's not really made for war, but he's got, with the shield, he's got the appearance of war, the ability of war, the ultimate sense of peace that comes from war. So in a way, these shields are very appropriate. But they're just, here's what I'm saying. In your summer home to have a $50 million decoration, man, you are just, let's cut some taxes, you know what I mean? Let's make it easier on the people. But nope, got to have it. Let's make them. Let's have them put up. Now, we mentioned his throne, which is just incredible, with 2 lions on either side. And then each step that goes down, there's more lions in a row. It's just so awesome. But I want to read you a quote from William MacDonald that just summarizes this chapter so well. He says, the purpose of chapter 10 is to emphasize Solomon's glory, from drinking vessels to sailing vessels, from an ivory throne to handcrafted chariots. He possessed everything the human heart could desire in quantities that stagger the imagination. That's a great way to put it. I love that. From drinking vessels to sailing vessels, everything a human heart could desire in quantities that stagger the imagination. That's what it is. Because so often, I've even quoted this, reality never lives up to fantasy. Reality never lives up to fantasy. You know, like the old saying, the grass is greener on the other side. People will say that in moving on from a relationship, like a marriage, more importantly, sadly. Well, the grass is greener on the other side. I'm out of here. And here's something I know about the grass may be greener on the other side, but you got to mow twice as much. You know that? As no one ever talks about that stuff, the maintenance that goes on with that. So there's a lot going on here. And Solomon's loaded. This is incredible. But at the end of the day, Solomon himself, over and over in the Proverbs, would attest to the fact, and we'll see this in a moment too, that his testimony was there's something more to life than material things. He often, if you can think about the Proverbs in your mind, there are so many times he would throw little things in there like, better to have a little with the fear of the Lord than to have the great riches and be empty without him, right? Say things like that over and over and over again. That he, as much as people like the Queen of Sheba came and marveled at his wealth, he would say, you know what though, I've learned that there's something about simplicity and godliness that's more important. And like when Paul went to the Corinthians, he said, we came to you with simplicity and godly sincerity. Not something fancy, not something articulate, not something of great wealth and value ultimately, just simplicity. And that's a whole study sometime on contentment. But here's something else too, and I want to make note of this before we move on and finish the chapter. It says that they brought him every year gold, silver, verse 22, ivory, apes, and monkeys. That right there gives you an indication of something right there. Apes and monkeys. This is a man who is bored. Because he's got everything. He has so much stuff. It's like, I don't know, give me some more of those monkeys, would you? Those things were kind of cool to watch jump around. That is a man that has so much luxury. And I am convinced that ease, comfort, luxury, taking it easy, kicking back, is not man's solution. I'm just telling you. I'm telling you for what it's worth. Just in your own personal life. Are you a better person from the easy times in your life or the hard times in your life? Have you grown more when life was really easy and flowing naturally or when things were difficult? When challenges were put in front of you that were insurmountable, you never thought you'd get through it. You were hurting so desperately, but you walked through that valley with the Lord and you came to the other side. That shaped you way more than if someone gave you a boatload of money and set you on a cruise ship for a year. That would not make someone more profound. It would make someone lazy, incompetent, not helpful, selfish, right? It's the testimony of the world throughout all of human history. Ease and comfort. It just begets something worse and worse. So I have to bring up 2 points, and I really see them as going in tandem together. A quote from John Adams that I so appreciate, but it's so devastating when you really understand the reality of it. And it goes right along with what we're going to look at in a moment, the Tytler cycle. John Adams wrote a letter to his wife, May 12th, 1780, to his wife Abigail. It's a precious letter. He said, "Oh, baby." No, he didn't actually say that. He said, just making sure you're listening. He said, "I must study politics and war, that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain." See, it's a beautiful thought, isn't it? A man like John Adams and the founding fathers that gave everything, like they said in the founding document, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They put it all on the line for you and I to be free today. I take that with great responsibility. They sacrificed everything they had, and they were wealthy men. They walked away from wealth in Britain to come here and live in poverty, the potential of that, and lose everything for the sake of freedom. And John Adams, as the second president, says, but I have to study politics and war so that my sons can know a better day, where they can study mathematics and they can learn how to build a society. And then their sons can learn how to do art and poetry and music. It's a beautiful American dream, man. It's the ideal. But the problem every single time is when we get to the generation that only studies art and poetry and music. Then you have the society that you and I are living in right now, where we're so bored we start making up how many bathrooms we need to have. That's what I'm saying. We've studied art and philosophy and science and bugs and grass and dirt and people and everything. We're like, I don't know, it's kind of boring. Let's get some monkeys. Let's do something fun. Maybe it's cool if we're like animals and we try to be something we're not. And it's too much pleasure and ease and comfort. And again, it's notable that when you go to parts of the world that suffer, people aren't wondering about how many genders there are. Go to the tribes in Africa that have very little. They're not like, well, we're not sure either. They're like, you're weird. Right? We're just trying to survive here. We're trying to find food for tomorrow, man. So again, my heart so resonates with that statement. The only problem is the ease and the comfort doesn't ever do anyone good. That's what stinks about the whole thing. So with that, I'm going to refer to you in a moment. In a moment, these guys are going to pull up a picture. I gave them exactly like 2 minutes before the service to do it, so I think they're going to do it. We go to Isaac in just a minute? Not yet. All right, build the suspense. Thanks, man. I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to read it to you first. It's called the Tytler Cycle of History. It starts with bondage. And it goes in a cycle. It goes from bondage to spiritual faith. From spiritual faith to courage. From courage to liberty. From liberty to abundance. From abundance to selfishness. From selfishness to complacency. From complacency to apathy. From apathy to dependence. From dependence back to bondage. It's this big old cycle that we find ourselves on in history. Go ahead and pull it up, guys. The reason I show you this one is because it's got a "you are here" arrow to it. And that's where we are right now. We're at apathy. You might even argue that we're getting closer, if not already at dependence. But I'm telling you right now, that arrow would be in a different spot if we didn't do COVID the right way. If people didn't have more sense about them, we let it go on too long as far as I'm concerned. I understand it was a real thing. I know we lost people, but the way that we forfeited our rights is the problem. And I can't believe we let that go on for 2 years, but we did. And if we didn't get our bearings back then, we wouldn't be in apathy. We'd probably be in bondage right now. It'd be a whole other thing. America is way more fragile than we think. Way more fragile. And it could be it could be the next generation that finds themselves right here in this country in bondage. In America that we would never even have thought of, never even dreamed could ever happen here. But that's the cycle. Here's the thing though. When you get to bondage, there'll be just a few strong men and women, honorable, courageous men and women that are like, let's do something. Let's separate ourselves. Let's be free again. And it takes so much tenacity to do it. But once those people do it, it leads to this beautiful, abundant life, which leads to selfishness, which leads to complacency, and right back to bondage ultimately. Now tell me that isn't depressing for a Thursday night, huh? That's free information right there, friends. But listen, John Adams aside, Tytler cycle aside, Solomon, money, gold, ships, horses, cats, whatever. It's just like, oh my word. Bring in some monkeys, would you? Just entertain me. Women, he was never satisfied. Never. And so now he's like, bring in the monkeys. That'll do it. Well, verse 23. This will be our last bit, last consideration here. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. Now all the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God put in his heart. Each man brought his present, articles of silver, gold, garments, armor, spices, horses, and mules, at a set rate year by year. And so verse 26, Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, whom he stationed in the chariot cities within with the king at Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedar trees as abundant as sycamores, which are in the lowland. And Solomon had horses imported from Egypt and Kava, and the king's merchant brought them in Kava at the current price. Now a chariot, in verse 29, was imported from Egypt, and the cost of 600 shekels of silver, and a horse 150. And thus, through their agents, they exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Syria. Now, we're going to see this more next week when we get into chapter 11. Solomon will unbelievably multiply wives to himself. But God was so clear in what a king of Israel was allowed to do. He was not to multiply wives, horses, or gold. Now, gold was the financial security. The multiplications of wife was just that sensual, endless desire sexually. And then the horses were like militarily speaking, like the fortification of having your own horses, man. But God specifically said that the kings of Israel should never multiply wives or horses or gold. And Solomon does all of it. He multiplies all of it. And here's the thing, just a good note for every one of us tonight, because that life of abundance that we're reading about is going to lead to devastation in his life and so many others. And I just want to remind us all tonight, no one can disobey God constantly and be better for it. No one in life can disobey God constantly and be better for it. So I know God said not to, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. And then to say, I'm going to do it in every area of my life. It's crazy. He had no safeguards. He just let it all. He did everything that God told him not to do. And he didn't care. But you know what's interesting? Is at the end of his life, in the book of Ecclesiastes, which we will study on Sunday morning eventually here before long, he does testify that there's no fulfillment in material things. There's no fulfillment in material things. And I love what David Guzik says about Solomon. He says, we don't have to have as much riches as Solomon to learn the same lessons. We don't have to have the same riches as him to learn those lessons. It's called vicarious learning. It's learning through somebody else. We can see Solomon as the ultimate picture of a person, a single person, with all of the wealth and all the security and all the blankets that people want and all the people that people want. And in the end, he'll look back on his life and he'll say, man, all of it was meaningless. It was empty. It was vain. And then his final conclusion is, but that a man should walk in accordance to God's laws and obey them. That's what he determines in the book of Ecclesiastes. That everything, all the material things in life. And it's really amazing. We have this testimony so many times over in human history. I mean, since the sexual revolution in the 60s and 70s, people have been having free sex like crazy, right? And there are these people, these famous people that have engaged in more sexual exploits than anyone alive. And they say the same thing Solomon does. They don't say, oh, well, that was so satisfying. I'm so glad I did that. They always say it was so meaningless. They'll testify, oh man, I had so many sexual experiences in one day, and the more I had, the more meaningless it was. Oh, that's surprising. Because we think in our mind, oh, if I could do more and if I could have more, it would fill me up, it would satisfy me. And it doesn't. There's something about simplicity, friends, again. And think about it in a marriage context, by the way. One of my favorite quotes about a husband for a wife is from Victor Marx years ago. He was in Bangor and he said, a real player isn't a man that goes out and sleeps with a woman every weekend. A real player is a man that can satisfy a woman for 20 years and continue to do so. That's a real player. That's a real man. I went out this weekend and yeah, well, that's really cool, dude. Can you like keep one woman satisfied for her whole life? And this is an old saying. I don't know how you hear this, but you know, for all the men out there, because men love to conquest and they love to conquer and all this kind of thing, it's disturbing in the wrong context. But for some reason, there's this idea that the more women I sleep with, the more I'm validated. I'm a real man. And the old saying is, if you've loved many women, you've loved none. If you've loved one woman, you've loved them all. If you've loved men, see, for a lot of guys, like, I'm going to go out there and be with all these women. Hey, man, if you can do that with one woman right, that's more satisfying and more fulfilling and more honorable than going out every weekend and having your exploits. And Solomon is just an incredible example of that.